Hi, sixth grade. Just want to welcome you to our next math video. The title of this math video is Decimal Place Value. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that you have your journal and you have your heading written, which is your name, the date, and the title of this video. And then also just a reminder that in your journal is where you do both your notes from this video and your practice problems. Okay, let's get started. So here we see a place value chart, and we have been talking up to this point about all of the place values that are to the left of the decimal point. I want to point out the decimal point that's in that white column there. But today we're going to shift our focus and we're going to talk about decimal place value. So that is all of the place value that is to the right of the decimal point. So everything that you see in yellow there. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, so on. You'll notice that all of those place values end in THS. So we're going to shift our focus to that today. A couple things I want to tell you when we're dealing with the right side of the decimal point is that the difference between the right side and the left side, one of the differences is that on the left side, as you move away from that decimal point, your place values get larger. But it's the opposite when we're talking about decimal place value. As you get further away from the decimal point, so as you go further to the right, your place values actually get smaller. And so that is one of the differences that we're going to see as we talk about decimal place value. So just like we can write whole numbers in different forms, we can write decimals in different forms as well. So we're going to go through the different forms that you can write decimal numbers in. The first is word form. And so just like we can write a whole number in word form, we can also write a decimal in word form. The way that we do that is we always start with our whole number if we have one. So in this case, we have the whole number 7. So we say 7. Our decimal point is always written with an and, so 7 and then we take a look at our decimal place value. So we have a 9 and we have an 8, and the last number, the 8, is in the thousandths place. Okay, we count over from that decimal point, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and so we would write it 7 and 98 thousandths. Now, another way that we can write a decimal besides word form is we can actually write it in fraction form. And for me, one of the easiest things to do is just to say the decimal. And that tells me the type of fraction that I'm going to write. So when I look at this decimal, I would say 7 and 98 thousandths. So we're going to write it like a mixed number. Okay, the 7 is the whole number. We already have that written there. And then the 98 thousandths becomes the fraction. The 98 goes on top as our numerator, and the 1,000 goes on the bottom as our denominator. Okay, so here are two of our forms. We can write our decimals in word form and in fraction form. Another way that we can write a decimal is in expanded form, and that should sound familiar by now. We worked on expanded form with whole numbers. So we're going to look at this decimal here. This is 7 and 98 thousandths. And so with expanded form, it means that we are going to show the value of each digit. And so we're going to start with our whole number, which is 7. And to that, we're going to add our first digit, which is in the, it's a decimal in the hundredths place. So we're going to add to that 7.09 or 9 hundredths. And then our next digit is the 8, which is in the thousandths place. So we're going to add to that 8 thousandths. Okay, those zeros that are there, they're like placeholders, and they make sure that your number is in the correct place value column so that it has the correct value. We want to make sure that this 8 is in the hundredths place. So in order to do that, we use the zeros as placeholders for the tenths place and the hundredths place. So this is 7 and 98 hundredths in expanded form. This is what it would look like. Okay, so now I want you guys to get a little practice on the different forms that we can write decimals in. And so what I would like for you to do is I'd like for you to take this decimal, which is 3 and 8,063 ten-thousandths, and I would like for you to write it in word form, in fraction form, and in expanded form. So go ahead and pause your video, and I'd like for you to write 3 and 8,063 ten-thousandths in word form, fraction form, and expanded form. Great job. Okay, so word form. Word form should look like this. You should have 3 and, okay, the and represents the decimal point, 8,063 ten-thousandths. Your fraction form should look like this. It's like a mixed number. 3, you have your 8,063 as the numerator, and then your denominator is 10,000. An expanded form should look like this. 3 plus 8 tenths plus 6 thousandths plus 3 ten-thousandths. And hopefully you remember to use your zeros as placeholders to make sure that your digits are in the right place value. Great job. All right. Our next thing we're going to talk about is comparing decimal numbers. Now remember, comparing is just another way to talk about greater than, less than, or equal to. And so we're going to look at how we would compare decimal numbers. So we're going to take a look at these two decimals and compare them. Now the way that we compare decimals is we take each digit one at a time and we compare them. So we're going to start with our whole number. So our whole number is 0, and so that just is kind of a wash. That doesn't help us in any way. Okay, but now we move on to our tenths place. So our tenths place, we have 2's in both tenths place. So we need to keep going because there's more numbers, there's more digits. So we need to keep going until we see if one of them is greater than or less than the other. So we're going to move on past the tenths to the hundredths place. And in the hundredths place, we have 2 6's. We're going to keep going. Okay, the thousandths place. On the right, we have an 8. On the left, we have nothing, or a 0. So because of that, we can say that 268 thousandths is greater than 26 hundredths. Now, if it helps you, you can always annex or write a 0 in that place so that they look a little bit more even. But either way, our answer would still remain the same. 268 thousandths is greater than 260 thousandths. Okay, why don't you get a little practice here? Go ahead and you're going to pause the video, and I would like for you to compare each of these sets of decimals. Great job. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one. So we have 967 thousandths is greater than, less than, or equal to 1,000. Oh gosh, I need to count these real quick. Tenths, hundredths, thousands, 10,000, 100,000s. 1,000 hundred-thousandths. That's a mouthful. So let's go ahead and compare. So we're going to start, our zeros are the same, and then we go to the tenths column. So in the tenths column, we have a 9 on the left and we have a 0 on the right. So right away we know that 967 thousandths is greater than 1,000 ten-thousandths. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So we have 4 and 40 thousandths. It's greater than, less than, or equal to 4 and 4 hundredths. So let's compare. The 4 and the 4 are the same. We're going to keep going. In our tenths column, we have zeros. In our hundredths column, we have fours. And in our thousands column, we have zeros. One of them is written, and on the right side, we can always add a zero there if we need to. So in this case, 4 and 40 thousandths is equal to 4 and 400ths. Because we can add that zero there, and that makes it equal. Okay, so now let's take a look at this last one. With word form, you can always turn it back into decimal form with numbers if that helps you to answer or to compare a little easier. So in this case, we're going to turn 5 and 43 hundredths into our decimal here, 5 and 43 hundredths, and then we're comparing it with this fraction. So we have 5 and 43 thousandths. So again, if it's easier for you to write that, okay, in standard form, that's what it would look like. So let's compare 5 and 43 hundredths with 5 and 43 thousandths. So we're going to go along. Fives are the same. Let's look at the tenths column. We have a 4 on the left and we have a 0 on the right. So right away we know 5 and 43 hundredths is greater than 5 and 43 thousandths. Last thing we're going to do is we are going to round some decimal numbers. So we're going to round decimals just like we round whole numbers. So let's take a look at this decimal. So we have 178 ten thousandths. So what if I asked you to round to the nearest thousandths? Okay, well, you would first start by finding the thousandths place, which in this case is the 7. And we're going to use our same rule. We look next door to the right, okay, which is the 8. If it's 4 or less, we let it rest. But if it's 5 or more, we raise the score. So in this case, okay, we're going to raise the score. So that 7 is going to become an 8. And you can put a 0 there if you want to hold that place value. Okay, so now we have rounded 178 ten thousandths to 180 ten thousandths. Okay guys, I'm going to ask you now to move on to our next video, which is going to be add and subtract decimals. It's a very quick, short video. Thanks guys.